Welcome. It seems that my first two substantive rants are both going to be about education. This evening on Lakeland on the ABC, there was a discussion of the quality of education in Tasmania, and in particular it looked at the level of literacy, the frighteningly low level of literacy in Tasmania. And I have heard of people drawing conclusions about Tasmania's viability as a state. Now, let's clarify a few things about the way that this data comes to our attention. Tasmania happens to be a regional area. I hate that word. Happens to be a rural part of Australia. And the only thing that's different between, say, Tasmania and parts of New South Wales are that Tasmania is a distinct state. So we have roughly 500,000 people for whom data is collected because the thing is a state. And we can talk about Tasmania as having a particular situation. We think of Tasmania as a homogenous entity. We don't think of, for example, various parts of New South Wales in a similar way. We always consider them in context, vis-a-vis Sydney, Newcastle, etc. So when we talk about problems with education in Tasmania, it should not be considered so much a problem with Tasmania as a state and its viability, but rather the opportunity to observe a bellwether, if you like, a canary in a coal mine. Essentially what Tasmania is giving us is a view into rural society in Australia in general, and the fact that there are some quite substantial educational problems. And these educational problems, of course, when manifest through ignorance, manifest as ignorance or what have you, end up endangering this country's social cohesion. So maybe I'm trying to defend my home state, but all I'm doing is saying these things need to be taken in context. One of the good things about Australia's state system, because responsibility for things such as education are delegated, although at the moment we are seeing problems with literacy in Tasmania, one of the good things about having state sovereignty in education is that states can experiment. This is something that, for example, Britain doesn't really have, where they have a much more centralised, England and Wales, Scotland's different, where the system is a lot more centralised. So, for example, when I was in matric, years 11 and 12, which people on the mainland would call high school, or even indeed when I was in high school, years 7 to 10, I had the opportunity to study computing, do computer programming, whereas those things weren't even on the radar. Well, they may have been on the radar, but they weren't seriously being implemented on mainland Australia. So what do we have with states running independent policies? Yes, we may have some issues with consistency, with equity, but effectively we have local hothouses that can experiment with things. And if things such as computer studies, for example, go well, which they did, other states adopted them. Having a bunch of states making their own choices allows us to learn from each other. This is one of the good things about Australia's federal system. A bit untargeted there, but I'm not even sure what my message was.